And as you know, I'm serve as the director of the BTI Institute. Today we'll have an audio-only call. As the presenter that you'll hear later said, we didn't have time to go to the makeup room. That's why we don't have the video on. But in future occurrences, we'll have the video on. As house
Yanis,
rules
this is
allow.
Sven. I can barely hear you.
Okay, so I will try to shout more. I apologize for this. And as house rules, I will ask you to please mute your microphones. And if you want to interrupt the presentation and ask questions, you can raise your hand. There is a button there where you can raise your hand. And Ioannis Konstantinidis will interrupt and give you the microphone. So if you can please mute your microphone. First of all, I want to thank everyone for participating. This is an important milestone for us. And if I can go to the next slide, Tom. So what we're going to do is, first of all, talk a little bit about the webinar, the purpose of the webinar. Tom Campbell, who is the executive director of the UH Office on Intellectual Property Management, he will introduce the mission model canvas, and then we will talk about some next steps and what the future is holding for all of us. Next slide, please. So the way I view the borders trade and immigration is facilitating making better connections between university research like yourselves and the operators. So that's the focus where we, BTI Institute, want to help all the performers and the champions to come up with ideas that will make the deliverables of your work to be used by the operators. Next slide, Tom. So, and we see the value of all the players contributing in all phases of the process from idea to a deliverable. The first phase is having priorities in the call of proposals. What are the priorities in terms of the ideas that we are soliciting? In the second phase, after your idea has been accepted and you are asked to develop a work plan, our vision is that we'll immediately link you with a DHS champion that will be selected by the Office of University Programs. And he or she help you and us develop a specific use case for the idea you have. We want to be able to be very specific. During the execution phase, the role of the champion is to help you steer your work to have deliverables that will have impact. They will be useful for them. And then ideally what we want to see is develop once and use widely across the DHS enterprise. We want to see your tool, technology, knowledge product used by the operators. Next slide, please. So the guidance that we received for the annual PI meeting is that it's best if the performers focus about 25% of their time on the accomplishments. Of course, they will give a little bit about the history of the project and the accomplishments and talk about 75% on the transition. I'll ask you not to look these numbers strictly, but we are in the process of putting together some guideline template slides that will help you basically present your project, the value that your project brings, and the steps to the transition. And the instrument that we have selected next slide, is the mission model canvas. That's not our idea, as you will hear later, but instead of just sending you some material to read, we thought it would be a good opportunity to ask Tom Campbell, who is the executive director for IP management at U of H and has vast experience in that topic, to give us a primer about parts of the mission model canvas allow you to ask questions. We have here also among us performers that have seen the mission model canvas and they have worked with this before. So Tom is going to give you some specific examples. So without further ado, Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Kakadiris, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Giannis mentioned, I'm going to talk with you today about a methodology, and we're going to go through some slides. We'll share these slides with you afterwards. And the intention is to try and help you in preparation for the meeting coming up in December. So we're using this concept called the mission model canvas. And if you step back and just ask, why are we headed down this path? We've gotten very clear direction from DHS that they have a strong emphasis on the value created from research. And so this is very mission-oriented research. They want to understand and be able to articulate how your work is creating value for DHS and other stakeholders. And so the BTI Institute has experimented with different approaches to this, different ways to try and look at tools to articulate this. And recently they started to try out this concept around the mission model canvas. There was a Word document that was sent out which provided some context on mission model canvas and provided some background. There's a link in that document which will take you to a website by Steve Blank and Dr. Osterwalder, who are the ones that came up with this concept around lean startup methodology. So one of the reasons that Dr. Kakadiris and the team chose this methodology is the hope is that not only will you be able to use this methodology for the work that you're doing at the BTI, but we're hoping that it is similar and you'll be able to use it in other areas of your work. And so in concept, it's very similar to what the National Science Foundation uses with the Innovation Corps. And so the tools and the nomenclature may be slightly different, but the concepts are very much the same. So we're hoping that this is not a one-off exercise, and we're trying to be very respectful of your time and how we work through this. As I mentioned, it's based on something called lean startup methodology, and there are really two pieces to that. One is called customer discovery, and then there's the tools that support that activity. Now, given that DHS is a government organization, rather than thinking about this as a for-profit customer type of a concept, in this discussion, we think about it through the concept of end users or beneficiaries. And so these are the folks that will end up using the technologies that you're developing. And we'll speak more in a few minutes about end users and beneficiaries. And then the tools that we use to capture the input from the customers and the work that you're doing are things like a mission model canvas, value proposition canvas, and we'll introduce those tools as well. So that's kind of where we're going over the course of the next few minutes. But I think before we get into it, it's important to recognize a couple things. The methodology that we're going to talk about may seem very, very different than the way that folks are typically used to developing technologies. And the way that I like to think it through is it's really the contrast between a market pull versus a technology push. And what I mean by that is, classic university research is done through a technology push where through perhaps R1 grants or other mechanisms, discoveries come through labs. It's a piece of technology, it's developed, and it's pushed to the market. The approach that the lean startup methodology is based on is trying to seek out end users and beneficiaries first, understand their needs, and then think about how your technologies can meet those needs. So the concept sounds relatively simple, but the approach, I think, can be somewhat confusing, somewhat uncomfortable. So just go into the conversation, I think, with that recognition. And that's certainly consistent with the feedback that we've gotten from the three teams that we've worked with. So Dr. Melamed, Dr. Burns, and Dr. Kakadiris have all gone through kind of the first pass of this, and we've gathered some feedback and learnings from them. And one of the pieces that they brought up is, the approach is understandable. The approach helps them get their ideas down, but it's kind of different in nature than what folks are used to using. So let's jump right in. First piece in this methodology is the point that I mentioned around customer discovery. And as I mentioned before, for BTI Institute projects, customers are actually beneficiaries and end users. And so what's the difference between those two? An end user is someone who is actually going to use your technology. They're the persons who will use it on a day-to-day basis. Beneficiaries may be people who might not be using it on a day-to-day basis, but they may benefit from the use of that technology. So a simple example of that would be you may have a department where the analysts in the department are actually using the tool. They would be the end users, the day-to-day users. But the supervisor in that department may be looking at the tool to use for resource balancing or for some other aspects. And so they would be a beneficiary, but not necessarily an end user. A key piece about both beneficiaries and end users are they're people in specific jobs and not companies. So one of the common differences when people start using these methodologies is they think, oh, well, my end user is DHS or my end user is CBP. Well, actually, an example would be it's Customers and Borders Protection Office of Field Operations Analysts. And so that's a specific group of people with a specific set of needs and wants. It's not DHS, it's not CBP, it's not the Office of Field Operations. It's the specific end users or beneficiaries who would be using your technologies. And if there's one takeaway from the entire webinar for this particular piece, is the most important aspect in all of this is actually talking with those beneficiaries and end users. And that sounds simple, but they're not always available. It's not always easy to figure out who they are. But that's the key to everything that we'll talk about with this methodology. You may also find that you have multiple beneficiaries and end users. And so don't get lost in trying to come up with 17 different beneficiaries and end users. Choose the ones where you think your technology has the greatest impact. And in this particular piece, it's important then to leverage your project champions. So in my work with various different BTI projects, sometimes a champion is an end user. Sometimes they may be a conduit or a gatekeeper to end users. And some folks might be neither, but they may be able to provide you a connection to someone who is a beneficiary or end user. And certainly they'll be able to provide you a DHS perspective on what it is you're trying to do. So that's the first piece of it. That's the customer discovery piece of it. Those conversations that you have then need to be captured and laid out, and the two primary tools that are used are something called a mission model canvas and a value proposition canvas. The value proposition canvas is where we're going to start because it's a subset of the mission model canvas. And the purpose of that value proposition canvas is to help you articulate for your sets of beneficiaries and end users what the value propositions are and the relationships between those value propositions and end users. So you may have value propositions that are applicable to one or two sets of end users. They may be applicable to all of your end users. And so the value proposition canvas is just a way to capture that information. So this is the mission model canvas. I hope that it displays well on your screens. Don't worry too much about what's here at the bottom. These are just credits given to the folks that created the mission model canvas and things of that nature, not anything that we're going to cover specifically today. And this helps you understand, hopefully, the whole layout of what a mission model canvas looks like. It has a number of different aspects. And this is the part where the methodology gets a little bit confusing. It's certainly different than what most people have seen. The two pieces we're going to focus on today are beneficiaries. It should say beneficiaries and end users. I'll get that corrected. Beneficiaries and end users, and value propositions. And so this is the mission model canvas. And if we just go forward to the value proposition canvas, we're taking those two components, beneficiaries and end users, and value proposition, and we're breaking them down further. So when we talk about beneficiaries and end users, you've got a wheel here that's divided into what are the specific jobs or responsibilities that we're talking about, what are the gains that those people are looking for, and what are the pains. And so the reason you have the dashed lines in here is we're just trying to represent you may have three separate sets of end users who may have similar or different gains and similar separate pains. And we'll go through what those are in an example. The other half of this value proposition canvas is the value proposition itself. And this is a place which will probably be much more comfortable and familiar to you all, because this is the piece where you articulate your products and services. And you articulate the features associated with those products and services, things called gain creators and pain relievers. And so the difference between the two is the key beneficiary piece of this template should be coming from your end users. And so this is an area that you don't necessarily have control over. This is going and talking to end users and beneficiaries and finding out what are the problems that they have. The left-hand side of it is articulating your product and service and how your product and service, those features, can create gains or relieve pains for those particular end users. Don't get caught up too much. We'll go through examples. Don't get caught up too much on whether it's a gain or a pain, but conceptually what that's supposed to be is for a particular end user, if they have a job and there are things that they have trouble doing, like let's say they have a particular piece of software they're working with that's very difficult to run, it's hard to get things to display in the right manner, that would be a pain. A gain would be stepping back and asking them, well, regardless of the constraints that you currently have in your job, what would you like to do? What would help you most? And so they may say things like ad hoc analysis and things that they don't currently have the capability to do. And so pains are more related to how do we make your current job with the tools you have easier? Gains are more related to if you were unconstrained, what would you really like to do? So that's the beneficiary end user side of this. And it's the piece that is probably least comfortable for most folks. Getting out and talking to those end users and beneficiaries and really trying to understand their roles, what their problems are, that's the part that's outside of your control. The value proposition piece is something that folks generally have experience in articulating, your technology, the product and service that you bring to the table, the features of that technology, whether or not that may be a gain creator or a pain reliever. And so this is the piece that's more related to the actual piece of technology you're working on. As you go through the process, and you'll find this methodology through the slides, first thing you do is you start by articulating or finding out or discovering through your project champion or other mechanisms, who are the end users for your technology? Who are the beneficiaries for that? Is it a list of, 15 different end users? If so, what are the top 3 or 4? Then you move to gains. If they were in an unconstrained world for each of these users, what would they like to do? And what are the current problems that you can solve or pains? And so you work through the wheel in that manner. You then start on the left-hand side of the canvas by articulating what are your specific products and services. It could be a software program. It could be a procedure or protocol. It could be the training associated with those things. It could be any number of pieces of technology that you all are working on. And then whether you articulate it in this manner or not, you know what the benefits of that technology you're creating are. And that then falls into either a gain creator or a pain reliever. And again, don't sweat whether or not it's a gain or a pain. Just capture the particular concept, and we'll move forward from there. So that's the value proposition canvas. And so what's an example? And so using that same methodology, when you think about beneficiaries and end users, again, pick the ones where you think you have the most impact. In this particular example, and again, credit to Dr. Melamed at Rutgers for sharing this with us and the work that he's done, as well as his tech transfer group there at Rutgers as well. In this particular case, they identified one set of end users, which were CBP OFO analysts. And so you can see that's a specific role, that's a specific group. And as they talked with them, they got into conversations about, we really could use some type of a tool when we're looking at points of entry that will allow us to do flexible experimentation, a tool that will allow us to do what ifs. This is not something that they currently do. This is something that they would like to do in an unconstrained environment. And then an example of a pain in that particular case is the tools that they are using, their model outputs are difficult to understand. So that's a pain with a specific piece of technology that they're currently using. Again, I'll keep coming back to don't sweat the difference between gains and pains. In this first step, just try to capture who your end users are and try to capture the concepts, whether it's a gain or a pain. So some suggestions as you work through this the first time. Try to, as best as you can, figure out the ones that will be impacted most beneficially from your work. A lot of times when you talk with folks, they have a long list of problems that they want to articulate. The key is to try to get them to tell you, if we could help you solve 2 or 3 of those problems, what would they be? So there's a prioritization piece there. And I'll keep mentioning it again. Don't get caught up in gain versus pain. Just capture the concept. So hopefully that gives you a roadmap for the value proposition canvas, the beneficiary and end user side of it. And then bear with me while I grab a drink. Then when you think about your value proposition canvas, you look at the left-hand side of the wheel and you start out with products and services. Okay, and so this is an area that probably comes very naturally to you. It was all part of the setup of the project. In this particular case, it was simulation software for POEs. That's the particular product or service. Now, there could be multiple products or services associated with that. That software may have training associated with it. It may have other features, but for us in this example, we're just going to talk about the software itself. And so relating your game creators back to your end user requests or problems or wants, this particular piece of software is designed to where they can simulate what-if analysis of traffic flow. That's one of the features that is a game creator that helps them do things that they can't currently do. Another aspect of this particular piece of technology is that it's been designed with visualization and analysis features so that they're not stuck with the kind of rudimentary product that they currently have. This particular piece of technology will help them visualize their problems better, and it will allow them to do statistical analysis that would have caused them, pain and time in their current operating environment. So some suggestions here. Mind the market pull versus technology push aspects. And so what I mean by that is stepping back to our canvas. It's very, very comfortable to start on the left-hand side here and articulate a value proposition, because this is typically how most folks are used to working. And then you start to kind of force fit the end user or beneficiary needs into the things that your product already does. Make sure you try to keep an open mind when you sit down with your beneficiaries and end users. And before you get into a conversation about your particular technology, just start by asking them, what it is that their key problems are. And you may find that unconstrains the conversation, and it helps you see things that you may not have seen if you started with the technology first. And so that's what I mean by mind the technology push and pull. It's very easy to start the canvas on the left side, but challenge yourselves to start over here by talking with end users and beneficiaries and work your way back to the value proposition. So I'm going to advance back to where we were. And then the other thing I would mention, and again, credit to Dr. Melamed and the folks at Rutgers for putting together a really good example and a really good piece of work. The other thing to think about when you think of products and services is it's not always, a hard piece of technology. It could be training. It could be a protocol. It could be a procedure. There are a number of different things that you can think about from a product and service standpoint. So that's the last suggestion, is to not forget the other pieces that support what would be perhaps called the harder technology deliverables. So that's kind of the value proposition canvas. Dr. Kakadiris has some next steps. But we covered a lot of ground. Let me stop and just see if there are some questions and things that I can clarify at this stage.
I would like to encourage everyone to raise their hand, and we'll give you the microphone. Okay, I realize that the Vic has a question.
Tom, this is Vic. I have a question on the model seems straightforward, but it seems to me that the model would have been applied as the project would have been first awarded.
Fantastic. Fantastic point, Vic. That's exactly right. So I think, the learning is as things go forward. The intention, and Dr. Kakadiris can speak to this more powerfully than I can, but the intention is to incorporate this up in the front end. And so it's not uncommon, though, Vic, for folks to adopt the methodology kind of midstream, if you will. And so, you may be in a situation where, you do need to start here with the value proposition because that's what's currently clear. And you use that as the platform back into trying to understand who your end users and beneficiaries are. I think regardless of where you're at in the process, you can try to work back through your champion or through other connections and really try to understand, who's going to use this whenever it's developed, who's going to use this. And that's something that ideally would be done in the front end, but it's certainly understandable that, if you're partway through this or maybe even towards the end of your work, that's just kind of where we are with respect to implementing the process.
And if
Okay.
I can
Appreciate
chip
it.
in
Thank you.
And if I can chip in my 2 cents as the director, Vic, it is our intention that this part of the mission model canvas will be completed during the work plan development phase. Okay, so it's kind of going from an idea to a specific use case.
Speak up again, please. It's very hard to hear.
Plan development. All right. So the goal is that this part of the mission model canvas will be developed during the work plan development phase. We have not done it, so that's why we're doing it midstream. And then, Eric?
Yes.
So ask your question.
This point about the idea of this being developed at the work plan stage of the process, and I would even say, I assumed that it was done before the work plan process, that is in the crafting of the RFP. So those of us who are in the middle of the research now, we are carrying out research that is following a work plan that was the product of the approval of a proposal that reflected a set of terms of reference and a set of research questions that BTI and DHS wanted answered. So they weren't looking for a technology or a training module or so on, but they were looking for a product, and the product was knowledge about A, B, and C. And so my assumption all along has been that the request for knowledge about A, B, and C was because specific individuals and offices 1, 2, and 3 in DHS wanted to know the answers. So for me, it would be very helpful, though my own research has begun to shed light on this, it would be for the project champion to be explicit with us about who precisely is it in DHS that wants to know the answer to the question that we have agreed to answer. And once we know that, it is very easy for us to articulate not only the product, in this case, knowledge, but also the gains and pains that it addresses. I mean, I must say, I actually like this value proposition canvas a lot. I think it's very well done. But to me, the question is, whoever put together these, the elements of this request for proposals at DHS can answer that question for us. And I would hope that the project champion would be the one who will know who those people are.
So Eric, let me take your question. I cannot speak about the internal processes that were used to derive the RFP questions. As you know, the RFP questions were announced even before we apply as a center. But it is truly our strong desire that the champions will help you identify the offices that are either the end users or beneficiaries of the work that you are doing. And you are going to contact them and understand what are the jobs that they are doing, what are the gains and pains. So I agree, we are doing it midway, but there is still a value, and I'm counting on the champions to help you connect with the end users and beneficiaries. And if the champions want additional help, they can reach out to us, to our program manager. So we are beginning the process of understanding how to complete this mission model canvas, and we are in baby steps. I'm glad that you see the benefit and you like the idea. So I'm not going to tell you what's happening in the past, but what is the model that we are moving. And in terms of the champions, we will not identify specific individuals. We're going to identify specific jobs. But of course, they have to help you find individuals at these jobs for you to interview. Does this answer your question, Eric?
Yeah, well, it largely does. I mean, it makes very good sense. I agree with you. It's about jobs and offices rather than individuals, although indeed we can speak with individuals about their sense of how their jobs and offices can benefit by answers to specific questions that DHS has posed. I would just say that I would like to rely on you to be sure that the champions understand that part of what we need from them is to articulate as specifically as they can which offices and jobs they perceive to be the key beneficiaries and what, if any, gains and pains they're hoping to address through the products of our work. I have, at the beginning of the project, was in touch with our champion who graciously offered to be of assistance in any way that he could. I did send him a note about 10 days ago and another about 5 days ago with a specific question and haven't heard any response, which I told him, if you don't have an answer, don't worry about it. But if what we need here at this stage of the process, at the mid-course of the work that we have agreed to do, is to add this extra piece, then I would like to be assured that the project champion understands precisely what it is that this step involves, and understands then that they will need to work with us to achieve this step.
So your comment is very well taken, Eric. And towards that direction, the BTI Institute is developing a champions manual is outlining the role and responsibilities in collaboration with OUP, identifying all these elements. And we have here in the webinar a number of champions, and I want to thank them for being here because we will ask their feedback in formulating this document. And the final point is, if for some reason, as you know, workloads change, priorities change, if for some reason the currently assigned champion cannot be responsive to the needs of the project, just let me know and I'll work with the program manager to see if we need to change the champion, not because they are not beneficiaries or end users, but maybe their workload does not allow them to be as active as you need them to be. So there is always, what we want to do is make better connections. And the minute you tell me, and I work with the Office of University Programs, it's much better rather than you waiting and not getting the answers that you need. So I want to encourage everyone in the call, performers and champions, to communicate to us what they need to succeed. And then let me work with the Office of University Programs, find the best solution under the circumstances. Is that okay, Eric?
Yes, I mean, it does. I don't actually feel that we need, I mean, we're midway in the middle of the research, and we're in that sense on target with our work plan. And my sense all along was that what we needed from the champion was that as the work is winding down, we needed to work together on the dissemination along lines that we'd outlined in the work plan. I did indicate that if along the way a contact or two at DHS might be useful beyond those we had, we might be in touch. And that's the thing that from where we sit, we need from, either we need from the champion, or if not, we can do it on our own, which was the way it was initially laid out, and that's what we're doing. But I would just say again, if the DHS interlocutors with BTI, and I gather the champions are the key here, understand this value proposition canvas, then I would hope that they understand that part of the role of champion is to present to the researchers, the research teams, the grantees, the answers to, to A on the right-hand side of the value proposition canvas.
Eric, your comment is well taken. It's both A, B, and C. And we are working on the manual, as I said. Right now, it's in the hands of the champions to provide feedback. Then it will come to the hands of performers. So remember, we are developing a process of making better connections. So your comment is well taken. You'll have the opportunity to comment. And I understand this is happening after you began the work, but there is value to do it even midway. So I'll stop here. We can continue offline if you want this, but I see it more on the role of the champions, and we have work underway, and I'll be happy to share with all of you. So I think there was someone else that wanted to make a comment and interrupted them. If yes, please jump in or raise your hand, actually. Okay, Ben.
Yeah, I have a suggestion actually. Our project has already gone through the process, and I can tell everybody that for us it was very difficult to understand. University of Houston was kind enough to participate in a conference call where we asked many questions, and we had our transition person here in Rutgers present. Therefore, what I would suggest is that those performers who want this to be vetted, since the DHS will be present during the presentations, I think it's a good idea for those people who feel that this should go through some review around the presentation before the formal presentation in the workshop. I'm talking only about the transition part, not about the achievements.
Of course, Kevin, the value of the value proposition canvas lies on being validated by your champion and make sure that these are the top 1, 2, 3 beneficiaries, 1, 2, 3 gains, 1, 2, 3 pain. So we are very cognizant of this, and thank you for your work in being the guinea pig, if I may add, for this methodology. Kevin, would you like to add some comments?
Yeah, I would. Thank you. I am one of the S&T champions, and I understand the need for this, and it's a very good idea. It very much fits with the operational context chart. It's the same idea applied in a different implementation. The issue I wanted to raise is when these projects in the original set were originally submitted, I don't recall the discussion of the value proposition canvas being part of the criteria. But nonetheless, if we were to go through this now for the effort of which I am the champion on, and I get a null set in pain or gain in the wheel, meaning the targeted customers don't have either relative to the technology being proposed, what do we do?
Kevin, this is, of course, a discussion that the program manager, the champion, and the PI need to have. And we are in this situation because this has not happened into the project development phase. But all of us should keep in mind that we are spending the American taxpayers' money. So if we discover at some point that we have to change course, all of us, let's have a call, let's brainstorm how to correct things. So the short answer to your question is, let me know immediately. Let's have a call, all of us, to see what's the next step. I don't believe there is a unique answer. It depends on the
Okay, and then my positive aspect on that question is when we talk about transition, and I know we're going to get to that, there's two types. There's knowledge and there is technology. That does the value proposition canvas work for both a knowledge transition and a technology transition? And my question is because pains and gains relative to the knowledge we can tell the customer will look different than the pains and gains that technology may provide them. And I'm currently a big fan of providing our partners knowledge to allow them to make good decisions. That in and of itself is priceless. Good decisions. Too many bad decisions have been made in acquisition programs, which we could have avoided through the very types of research that these centers of excellence conduct. So I'd like to see how these Canvas ideas pertain to what we can find out and educate them on, and the knowledge about what they might or might not know about pains and gains even, and see where that goes.
So Kevin, you just described the pain, correct? That there are many bad decisions that have been made because you don't have enough information. Remember, I'm a graduate of the National Science Foundation I-Core program, so I have seen the lean business startup methodology. I've not worked with a mission model canvas. From what I have gathered so far, it will work for knowledge products too. But the proof is in the pudding, correct? We have the 10 projects that will go through this process. You will see the other boxes on the mission model canvas. And we may need to adjust it for the specific agency, but I think it gives us a whole framework to work with. So let's see. Let's see if it works for you, Kevin. And of course, we are open for suggestions. This is a journey for us. I'm not here to say,
yeah, I agree.
Model canvas, take it or leave it, and it's the answer to everything. I'm here to say, let's start with mission model canvas, and let's see how, as university researchers, we can have impact, develop things that people will use. Otherwise, it's just things on the shelf. We are wasting the money of the American taxpayer.
Yep, and it gives us a framework to make those decisions. Okay.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Any other comments, questions? That's why, we could send you the PowerPoint, we can make the video, but we wanted to hear your questions because this is a journey. We want to improve our process in this journey, and all the questions are valuable, and I want to work with each one of you addressing your concerns. Any other questions or comments? Please raise your hand so I can see you here in the console. All right, so although it appears we have no more questions, remember this is an active discussion. Feel free to reach out to any of us here at BTI Institute. We want to be your collaborators in developing this process. So if we can go to the next steps slide here. Tom,
are you ready for the next slide, one? Please. Yeah.
Yes. So basically the idea is that we want to ask you to work in the next month or so with your champions and with end users and beneficiaries to develop your value proposition canvas. And I think there are lessons that will be learned because it is not necessary that your project addresses all the pains or all the gains that you will collect by interviewing your beneficiaries and users, but it will be the first step understanding where your project sits, whom will benefit, what do they want to see, and you may need to adjust your work plan, but that's the flexibility that we have. That's why we have a cooperative agreement. That means if we understand that we have to change some things, then all of us will be flexible to change things. We have the mechanism to do that. So I'll ask all the performers and I'll ask all the champions to please be generous with their time and help the performers develop their value proposition canvas. We are in the process of developing a presentation template that will help you with that. But of course, we're going to seek your input on how we can make this template. I personally like templates because it gives guidance to all of us and it gives us a framework that we are all thinking of this problem. But I don't have the optimum template. I want to seek everybody's feedback to make it better. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Tom, you will see that there are all these boxes that we haven't talked about. But all these boxes are essential to be filled for each project. You know, what is the buy-in, support, deployment, so on and so forth. So those of you who are ahead, hint, hint, Ben, you can start thinking about these new boxes. And those of us who are focusing on the value proposition canvas, we can focus on this. We'll have another webinar. Tom has kindly agreed to lead us in explaining the other boxes here in the mission model canvas. And it is my aspiration that by spring break, each project will have a complete mission model canvas, because this canvas will be the framework that will tell us how the project, how the outcome of this university research will be used by the operators and the department. So I commit to you to have another webinar, and I kindly ask you to start immediately with your champions on the value proposition canvas. That's all I had today. I want to thank Tom again for his kind presentation, but I want also to take additional questions. Eric?
Yes, this is just, do the champions know that this is something that is being asked of them?
So the Office of University Programs is putting together the information that will be communicated also to the champions.
Okay, so I would like not to have to explain this to the champions. I'd be happy to work with the champion on bringing it about. But I think this is something that I would like to count on the staff at BTI to prepare our champion to have that conversation.
And that was the purpose of the webinar today. That's why all the champions were invited. Unfortunately, some of them were not available. The video of this presentation, along with question and answer, will be available to all performers and champions. So those performers and champions that were not present will have the opportunity not only to view the video, see the questions, but reach out to us for clarification. So we'll definitely make all material available, Eric.
Okay, now I'll refer our champion to you for an outline and account of what's up here.
Please do. Any other questions? Well, since I don't see any other questions, I want to thank you very much for taking the time. And I want also to ask you, if you have additional questions, reach out to me, reach out to Tom as you see fit. And I want your feedback. What's good, what's bad, how can we improve? Keep the goal in mind, making better connections. And with that, I thank you very much. I wish you a good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us today. Bye, everyone.